Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video I'd like to discuss Boris Johnson's plans to somehow hypnotise the British public into making Brexit run smoothly with what is being termed shock and awe tactics. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, as we get towards the end of the year and leaving the transition period without a deal, the government need as much of the British public as well as the business community as possible on board with just what a magical land Brexit will create for us. Unfortunately, Michael Gove has already consumed all of the drugs that were intended to push onto the rest of us, so he's going to have to use a communication strategy instead at the cost of £4.5 million. Now, I'm not going to bash the cost as such, because whatever happens at the end of the year, the public need to be informed in order to limit the damage. In fact, the public should have been informed long before now, and a communication strategy absolutely forms part of that plan, and of course it's going to cost. Fine. What is interesting is that Brexit, which was supposed to deliver instant benefits to Britain, is actually going to be so damaging that the government needs to engage behavioural scientists in order to hypnotise us into a different way of thinking. And therefore, you know, before people get worried, by the way, that the government are using public money to carry out a mass deception project against the British people in the same way as the original Brexit campaigns ran, I wouldn't concern yourself too deeply about that. They're using the same company as carries out the government's communications on the coronavirus. So without even commenting on their morality, we do at least know that they aren't exactly the most talented operators available for this job. So, what is the plan in order to change our behaviour? It's going to come in 4 waves. The first wave is to take place in July and August, so starting from next month. And it consists of what they call a nudge or shove. This involves warning us of the consequences and opportunities of Brexit. So that'll be interesting in 2 ways. One, they're going to have to start warning about the consequences. So far, they've completely denied, flatly denied it. Project Fear, it was all called. They are now going to have to start warning people about the consequences, where hitherto there have only been unicorns. And we'll maybe even find some of those more mythical opportunities in Brexit as well. I'm looking forward to that. 2, Wave 2 is September to November, and takes the form of what is being called shock and awe. Now, let's just pause there for a moment. This is a military term, of course, that was it was a term used for a massive surprise attack, throwing massive resources at your enemy in order to utterly demoralise them, generating feelings of hopelessness, and therefore you've beaten them. Now, is that really the term the government wants to be using in this case? You know, because they're using shock and awe on the British public. Are we now considered their military enemies? Is that it? And, you know, as I say, another aspect of shock and awe is it's a surprise. You know, it relies upon the element of surprise. But if they're telling us about it now, over several months before it's implemented, it's not really going to be much of a surprise, is it? Then the 3rd wave is December to January, and the focus here is on loss avoidance. So again, Brexit is going to create huge losses for people, for businesses. The government's strategy now depends upon convincing people of that. And this is tricky. I'm going to come to this in a bit, but it is tricky because they've spent so long trying to convince people that it will only be marvellous. They're now going to have to switch to, actually, yeah, it's sort of marvellous, but also there's lots of very bad things that are going to happen if you don't do something. So they're going to be focusing people on loss avoidance. What can you do to minimise the pain that comes with Brexit? Which you all voted for, is what they will say. And then the 4th wave, which is to begin from January 2021. In other words, we've left the transition period where obviously at the moment we're no longer members of the EU, but we won't be in the single market either. And this is to focus apparently on new opportunities. That also sounds interesting. I will be looking forward to that. In fact, I cannot wait the 7 months. Now, given that wave 4 will also be a good time to take stock of the real impact of the coronavirus handling in the UK compared to other countries, because the government at that point will really struggle to say now is still not the time for these comparisons. As well as, of course, the economic impact, and the employment situation might also be interesting. Perhaps the Conservatives will avail themselves of the new opportunity to find a different leader. We shall see. But when you look at the stages, you think it seems to be uncharacteristically frank for Brexiteers. They're going to have to start talking about the downsides to Brexit, and they're going to have to start doing it next month according to this strategy. Hitherto, they have banned all attempts at negative thinking. Only the positives were allowed. But this strategy involves warnings and the concept of loss. So what's that about? Well, apparently the behavioural scientists have said that businesses are not going to respond to overly positive messages. They simply won't respond because it's not credible and therefore not helpful. What they want in order to take action, because they need businesses to take action, is a message that they can believe. And nobody but a gormless fool would think that there are no downsides to Brexit, even if they were still broadly in favour of this abomination of a policy. But then there's the flip side. So I already alluded to this. So Brexit worked because the powers behind it convinced millions of people in this country that Brexit has no downsides. So people were thinking, a lot of people that voted for it weren't necessarily fully seized of the benefits, but they got themselves into thinking, well, look, you know, the situation at the moment is pretty crap. It's worth a punt. You know, we'll just try it out. They weren't fully seized of it, but they'll just try it out, because they weren't thinking about the great risk, because that was put out of their minds. And millions of people still believe it. It is quite incredible, but not at all helpful. Now that the government no longer need their supporters to do anything for them, there's nothing the people of this country can do now in order to go through with this nightmare. That's it. We've given them all the political power they need. They now need their supporters to wake up to reality, because as bad as a hard Brexit has to be of necessity, no matter how well you try and prepare for it, it is possible to make it even worse by jumping off that cliff blindfolded, which, if you are just looking forward to this hard Brexit and rubbing your hands with glee, you are. You're preparing to leap. And there's millions of people in this country still like that. Millions, you know. And the vast majority of people in Britain have done absolutely nothing to prepare for Brexit. According to a recent poll, 74% of people, not a thing. Nothing. And for some, this will be because they don't know what to do. It's not. We're not saying 74% of people think it'll be fine. That is not true at all. Many will not know what to do. Of course not. Nobody's telling them what. They're not even telling them what Brexit actually is for them to be able to work it out for themselves. But a lot of people, even if they understood the implications, still wouldn't be able to work out what they need to do. And when it comes down to it, Brexit means Brexit works to get some people to put a cross in a box, but it's bog useless as a form of life-affecting advice. Now, the government need people to act. Otherwise, the consequences will be far worse than they will be anyway. So what it sounds to me like is that there's going to be a sudden shift in how government ministers respond to questions about Brexit. That being said, don't imagine that they're going to now accept that Brexit is absolutely hazardous and leave it at that. I suspect the plan will be to, first of all, acknowledge the downsides, because they need people to respond to them. After which they will say that they've always acknowledged them, but it's what people voted for, and ultimately they were delivering the will of the people. That will always be added at the end. But then another thing they will add, I'm sure, is after talking about all the downsides, they'll say, of course, you know, those who seize the opportunities will be the ones to reap the rewards. Therefore, blaming you if you do not reap the rewards. That's your fault for not seizing the opportunities. What they probably won't say is what they're referring to are hedge fund managers, not ordinary people. but still it'll be your fault. Just like it'll be your fault if we have a second wave, if we have a second wave of COVID, it'll be your fault because they told you to use British common sense. You obviously didn't do that. And if Brexit goes badly for you, well, that's your fault for not seizing the opportunities. So there it is. Expect to be nudged, shocked, loss avoid, and then seek new opportunities in 4 distinct phases, all brought to you by Her Majesty's government starting from next month. So I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.